I raced back home, and I think I ran every red light there was, trying to get to my house. And the phone was ringing, and it kept ringing.
Everyone thinks they know how Elvis Presley died. A bad heart. A tragic ending for the king of rock and roll. But here's what they don't tell you. The real autopsy, the one his own father demanded, has never been seen by the public. Not once. It's been locked away for nearly 50 years, and the countdown to its release has already started. So what is actually inside that report, and who's been protecting it? The night Graceland went silent. August 16th, 1977. Elvis Aaron Presley was 42 years old, and by that afternoon, he was gone. His fiancée at the time, 20-year-old Ginger Alden, found him unresponsive on the bathroom floor of his Graceland mansion. She later described the moment in devastating detail in her own memoir, recalling exactly how he was lying and the position of his hands. Paramedics rushed him to Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. Doctors worked on him. It didn't matter. Within hours, the world's biggest star was pronounced dead, and a story that would be repeated for nearly 5 decades was already being written. Outside Graceland, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Tens of thousands of fans converged on Elvis Presley Boulevard within hours, many of them in visible shock, some collapsing in the summer heat as word spread. Television networks broke into regular programming. By the next morning, newspapers around the world had already run their front pages, and the machinery of grief, and eventually the machinery of legacy, was already turning. The official cause of death, according to Shelby County Medical Examiner Dr. Jerry Francisco, was cardiac arrhythmia tied to hypertensive cardiovascular disease. In plain terms, his heart gave out. That was the headline. That was what fans were told to accept and grieve and move on from. Francisco's report was signed and released quickly, and it would go on to shape the public understanding of Elvis's death for decades. But that headline came from a brief 2-page medical examiner's summary, not the full picture. It wasn't even signed until October of 1977, more than 2 months after Elvis died. And almost immediately, the people closest to the case knew there was a lot more to the story than a simple bad heart. So, if the official explanation was really that simple, why did Elvis's own father insist on a second, private autopsy that nobody outside a small circle has ever been allowed to see in full? The Doctor Who had the keys to everything. If you want to understand what really happened inside Graceland in the final years of Elvis's life, you have to understand George Nicopolis. Everyone around Elvis just called him Dr. Nick. He wasn't some random physician. He was Elvis's personal doctor, his gatekeeper, the man who controlled nearly everything that went into his patient's body. And the numbers here are not simply rumor. They come from documented records. In the first 8 months of 1977 alone, Dr. Nick reportedly prescribed Elvis more than 10,000 doses of various controlled medications, including substances intended to affect pain, sleep, mood, alertness, and other aspects of his medical condition. More than 10,000 doses in 8 months, all reportedly issued through legal prescriptions and authorized by the same physician. And Elvis wasn't Dr. Nick's only high-profile patient. Nicopolis also treated rock and roll pioneer Jerry Lee Lewis, and his name would later come up in connection with boxing legend Muhammad Ali as well. That detail matters, because it shows this wasn't a doctor with one problem patient he couldn't say no to. This was a pattern, spanning multiple famous names over multiple years. The state noticed long before the criminal justice system caught up. In January of 1980, the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners had already found Nicopolis guilty on 10 of 20 counts of indiscriminately prescribing controlled substances, this time to 16 different patients. The punishment at that stage was a 3-month suspension of his license and 3 years of probation. That's a state medical board made up of his own peers, concluding under oath that he had a documented pattern of overprescribing before Elvis's death was ever tried as a criminal case. Nicopolis would later claim he was actually trying to manage Elvis's dependency, even manufacturing placebo pills by the hundreds to wean him off the real thing. He repeated that defense for the rest of his life, including in his own memoir. Maybe some of that is true, but you don't get investigated by a state medical board for trying too hard to help someone. So how did a doctor with an already documented history of overprescribing walk into a criminal trial over Elvis's death and walk out with zero convictions? The trial that was supposed to answer everything. Later in 1980, Dr. Nick was indicted on 14 counts of illegally overprescribing potentially dangerous and habit-forming medications, not just to Elvis, but to singer Jerry Lee Lewis and more than a dozen other patients. 2 of those counts were specifically tied to what he had prescribed Elvis between May of 1976 and August 16, 1977, the day Elvis died. Prosecutors detailed the prescriptions involved, describing them broadly as powerful medications with sedating, pain-relieving, and stimulating effects. The trial itself began in September of 1981, and it quickly became a very public defense of Nicopolis's character. Several of his fellow physicians took the stand to support him. One doctor described him as an exceptional practitioner when dealing with challenging patients who required long-term medical care, arguing that not every physician would have had the patience to manage someone as demanding as Elvis. Testimony from other medical professionals appeared to carry significant weight with the jury. The prosecution's case started to fall apart from the inside. Partway through the trial, the judge dismissed several of the counts for insufficient evidence, and prosecutors themselves cut their case short, deciding their remaining witnesses would only repeat testimony the jury had already heard. In November of 1981, a Shelby County jury acquitted Nicopolis on every single remaining charge. The jury essentially decided that his prescribing, while excessive, didn't cross into criminal intent. He kept his medical license, at least for a while. That while didn't last forever. In 1995, the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners permanently revoked his license, stating plainly that he had been overprescribing to numerous patients for years. So the same doctor who walked out of a criminal courtroom with no convictions was, 14 years later, stripped of his license entirely by his own profession. If he really did nothing criminal, why did the medical board eventually decide he couldn't be trusted with a prescription pad at all? The report nobody's allowed to read. Here's where this story stops being just about one doctor and becomes something much bigger. After Elvis died, Dr. Nicopolis secured written authorization from Vernon Presley for a private, independent autopsy separate from the medical examiner's official report. Because so many grieving fans had gathered outside, the procedure was actually carried out inside Baptist Memorial Hospital itself, rather than at the medical examiner's facility across the street. That private autopsy became the legal property of the Presley family, not the state of Tennessee and not the public. The result is that the complete findings, the full toxicology tables, the tissue analysis, every detail beyond that brief 2-page summary have never been released. Reporters have tried. In the early 1980s, journalists from the ABC program 2020 actually took the case to Shelby County Chancery Court, seeking a court order that would force Dr. Francisco to hand over the complete toxicological, pharmacological, and autopsy reports behind his conclusions. They lost. The case eventually reached the Tennessee Supreme Court, which ruled in 1982 that the district attorney wasn't legally obligated to pursue the records on a private citizen's demand, and the autopsy stayed exactly where it was, sealed and privately held. It's worth being precise about what sealed actually means here, because a lot of what circulates online gets this wrong. There was never a single government order locking the file away for exactly 50 years. What actually happened is simpler and, honestly, more interesting, because the full autopsy was privately commissioned by the family rather than ordered by the state. it legally became private medical property, and the family has simply chosen not to release it. Separately, under Tennessee law, the official death certificate itself is required to stay private for 50 years after death, which lands on that same 2027 date. Two different legal mechanisms, one shared deadline, and the net result has been the same either way. Nobody outside the family and a handful of doctors has ever seen the complete file. So for close to 50 years, the Presley family has controlled the one set of documents that could settle, once and for all, exactly what was happening inside Elvis's body when he died. What does it say about a natural death that its full medical record has been kept out of public reach for this long, even if the family, not the government, made that call? The theories that filled the silence. When you keep a document out of public reach for 50 years, you don't stop people from talking. You just stop them from knowing, which is so much worse for a story like this one. And into that gap, theory after theory has poured in. The most persistent explanation isn't some wild tabloid fantasy. It's a medical argument that has been raised by professionals as well as fans. Toxicology findings discussed over the years, including limited disclosures and later independent commentary, indicated that multiple prescription medications were present in Elvis's system at the time of his death, even though the official cause was classified as cardiac rather than medication-related. One recurring theory is that the combined effects of several powerful medications may have placed additional strain on his body, potentially contributing to the cardiac event that killed him. In that view, the natural causes explanation and the medication history may not be completely separate stories, but parts of the same chain of events. However, this theory has never been definitively confirmed, and important questions surrounding the full medical evidence remain unresolved. Then there's a theory that has nothing to do with what killed Elvis and everything to do with what happens after death. Over the years, some have pushed the idea that the body actually buried at Graceland isn't Elvis at all, pointing to things like a supposed misspelling on an early grave marker as evidence. One such effort in the late 1980s even secured court approval to pursue exhumation and testing, though nothing from that push produced verified proof of a different body or a different outcome. It remains an unconfirmed claim rather than an established fact. More recently, an entirely different kind of theory has spread online. Claims that Elvis's casket was secretly reopened, revealing something inside it. Some versions claim the casket was found completely empty. Others claim hidden notes or mystery objects were discovered. None of these claims are tied to any documented exhumation, any court record, or any named forensic team. It remains an unconfirmed claim rather than a documented event. And the real story, a sealed record and a room full of unanswered medical questions, has been sitting there for decades on its own. That's the real tragedy hiding in this story. Legitimate medical and legal questions have been buried beneath decades of speculation, making it difficult to separate documented evidence from theories that have grown over time. So, which version will actually hold up if the complete report ever becomes public? The medical argument that multiple medications may have contributed to Elvis's condition, or the claims surrounding a casket that may never have been reopened in the first place? The business that never stopped running. While the family was grieving and the medical questions were piling up, another machine was already moving in the background. The business of Elvis Presley. His funeral was held at Graceland on August 18, 1977, staged by his longtime manager, Colonel Tom Parker, with more than 20,000 mourners flocking to the mansion to pay their respects before burial. Parker reportedly attended the service just long enough to secure Vernon Presley's agreement that he would keep control over his son's posthumous earnings, even as the estate itself was in serious financial trouble at the time of Elvis's death. That control didn't last. It eventually took a court battle to remove Parker and his management fee from the estate entirely. Priscilla Presley then stepped in as an executor and helped build Elvis Presley Enterprises, the company that turned Graceland into the tourist attraction and licensing empire it is today, and which continues to control Elvis's name, image, and legacy to this day. That matters here because it's the same broader structure that has controlled access to the sealed autopsy for decades. The people managing Elvis's image, the people managing his estate, and the people who decided the full medical record would stay private have, at various points, been the very same small circle. None of that proves anything was hidden inside the report itself, but it does mean the decision to keep it sealed has never been made by neutral outsiders. It's been made by the same family and the same business apparatus that has profited from a clean, uncomplicated version of the story for close to 50 years. There's a version of this story that rarely makes it into the headline-driven retellings, and it's the one about the 9-year-old girl who was actually inside that house. Lisa Marie Presley was born in February of 1968, which made her 9 years old the day her father died. In her posthumous memoir, released after her own death, she revealed that she had written a poem in her diary before he passed, containing the line, "I hope my daddy doesn't die." She wrote about frequently seeing her father in visible pain as a young girl, long before the rest of the world was told there was anything wrong. The next day, she was met with the sight of her father being wheeled out to an ambulance and told he had died. In her own words, her life as she knew it was completely over. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a grown woman, decades later, describing in her own memoir what it was actually like to be the child at the center of the story everyone else turned into a product. The aftermath stayed with her for the rest of her life. In interviews over the years, she spoke about facing serious personal struggles during her teenage years following her father's death. She later revealed in her memoir that she also battled a severe dependency on prescription medication as an adult, describing how it eventually became a major part of her life. She died in January of 2023 at 54 years old, only a few years after the devastating loss of her son, Benjamin Keogh, in 2020. None of this proves anything about what's inside the sealed autopsy, but it's a reminder of what tends to get lost whenever a story this big gets simplified into a headline and a merchandise line. Behind the sealed report and the courtroom drama was a family that spent decades living with the real, unglamorous consequences of addiction in more than one generation. So when people talk about who benefits from keeping that report sealed a little longer, is it really about protecting privacy or protecting a version of the story that's been more profitable than the truth? What 2027 could actually change? We're closer to that answer than we've ever been. When the 50th anniversary of Elvis's death arrives in 2027, both the sealed death certificate and, according to consistent reporting over the years, the private autopsy Vernon Presley commissioned are expected to finally become accessible. That means, for the first time since 1977, journalists, researchers, and fans could get direct access to the toxicology tables, the tissue findings, and the full medical detail that's been fought over in court and speculated about for 2 generations. It's worth being honest about what that report can and cannot establish. It cannot confirm claims about a secret casket reopening when no documented reopening has been established in the first place. Nor would it prove theories that Elvis secretly survived and disappeared from public life. What it could provide is clearer medical evidence about the medications found in his system and whether their combined effects may have contributed to his condition. Ultimately, that evidence could help clarify whether cardiac arrhythmia fully explained his death or whether the circumstances were more complicated than the original account suggested in 1977. For close to 50 years, one family has controlled the fullest version of the truth about how the king of rock and roll actually died. In 2027, that control finally runs out. A man who redefined American music, who's been dead for nearly 50 years, and the public still doesn't have the full paperwork on how he died. Not because a judge sealed it, not because the government hid it, but because one family decided the world wasn't entitled to it yet. That's not a wild conspiracy. That's a documented legal fact, sitting right there in court records from the 1980s, still playing out today. And when 2027 finally arrives, it won't just be fans and historians paying attention. It'll be doctors, toxicologists, and journalists who've been waiting decades for the chance to finally check their theories against the real numbers, instead of against a 2-page summary and 50 years of second-hand speculation. If this story pulled back the curtain for you, don't let it end here. Share it so more people get the real story. And subscribe, because when that sealed report finally opens in 2027, we'll be the ones breaking down exactly what's inside it.